Good morning. My name's Veronica Schulman and I'm a gastroenterologist. I'd like to talk to you today about irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS. As many as 1 in 5 of the UK adult population are affected by IBS to some degree, and it's been the focus of much research in recent years. It's typical for those suffering from the condition to report frequent diarrhea or constipation, or a mixture of both. They also experience abdominal bloating and pain. I'm always surprised more people don't suffer from IBS because many of us lead such chaotic, highly pressured lives and are often unable to maintain regular eating habits, which seems to aggravate the condition. It's difficult to treat, with no single medicine consistently and reliably resolving the symptoms in all cases. To add to the problem, a small number of people have what's called refractory IBS. That's IBS that hasn't responded to the normal first-line treatments. Unlike today, in the past, IBS symptoms were easily confused with other conditions, and the difficulty in making a definite diagnosis increased the uncertainty and therefore the suffering of many patients. So what about making an accurate diagnosis of the condition nowadays? Well, there's a stool test which rules out infection, while an endoscopy will eliminate the possibility of inflammatory diseases such as Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, which share some symptoms with IBS. A comprehensive history and special laboratory tests will in most cases prove that someone has IBS. The result is that the GP and the patient can trust in the accuracy of the diagnosis, and less time is wasted before starting an appropriate treatment. So next, I'll talk a little about how I like to treat my own IBS patients. It's been known for some time that diet is crucial, but opinions have varied considerably on which foods trigger the condition. I've become particularly interested in a group of starches and sugars, which many patients struggle to digest, and which are clearly linked to IBS symptoms. These starches and sugars are present in some grains, vegetables, and dairy products. Interestingly, they are also contained within one group of artificial sweeteners added to some food and occur naturally in certain fruits. I start my treatment of an IBS patient by putting them on a strict diet for up to 6 weeks. During this time, all foods with the starches and sugars we've identified as problematic are excluded, and then slowly they are reintroduced one at a time to see if there's an adverse reaction. Common problem foods include wheat, onion, garlic, and broccoli. Up to 75% of patients improve to some degree when they're in the initial exclusion stage. Sugars and starches are found in so many different foods, and it's unlikely that patients will be sensitive to all of them. In fact, it may only be 2 or 3. So, how do patients react to this approach? I'll tell you about a patient called Matt, who lived in fear of stomach pain. He'd almost become frightened to eat anything. He'd endured it for several years and had seen many doctors, and even been willing to experiment with alternative medicine. But none of the treatments had provided much relief. Like many IBS sufferers I meet, he was overwhelmed by the amount of information about nutrition that was available. But he had serious doubts about the very many claims made by companies promoting particular diets as miracle cures. Matt still believed his condition could at least be controlled and desperately wanted to try something that had solid research behind it. He was impressed by the steady and structured methods I rely on. Before seeing me, another patient I'll call Sophie had been told to cut out dairy produce from her diet, but she found it hard to sustain and her symptoms continued, although they were intermittent. By the time she was referred to me, Sophie had become confused about whether dairy was really causing her problems. Her IBS was getting worse because she was so anxious. When she followed my method, she was able to discover precisely which foods were triggering her symptoms, which in her case included beetroot, apples and oranges, all of which she particularly liked and so was initially reluctant to give up. However, she knew there was no real alternative, and she's now made more or less a full recovery. Patients with IBS are often deeply concerned about the basic health of their bowel and can mistakenly think that it isn't normal in some way. I often have to reassure them that their bowel is just very sensitive and that it won't suffer any long-term damage. If a patient usually follows a diet which controls their symptoms, and one day they indulge themselves by eating something they shouldn't and get some symptoms, that's not going to do much harm. The diet can be resumed and the symptoms will resolve themselves.